Hi, Sasha.
Aloha.
Welcome. Damejon Boniardi, your host. And we're going to be talking today about releasing fear and waking to the awakening through a different angle than other than the spiritual one. Because I have the personal belief that by not knowing our true origins, our identity, that help us to remain in fear and that acknowledge our higher history. Sector throughout human history has done their work to keep hidden from the population in order to keep us engraved in fear and of growing and acknowledging who we really are. I found, Sasha, your book quite amazing. I have learned on my own some of Zecharia Sitchin's teachings and his findings that he has done, and the history of humanity seems to be a little bit different than what we have learned in school and what we are currently still being led to believe. The story seems to have been a little bit different than that, and I like to share your take, your message with the people that is now watching our talk.
Thank you so much, Adrian. I welcome this opportunity. I'd like to say a little bit about the function of fear. When any part of us that we identify with thinks that it's not going to be the whole thing anymore, it gets scared. But if you take that fear, if you take the fear and you say, what would happen if I took the risk of identifying beyond what I've identified with, the part that's scared, because then it won't be exclusive anymore. And so the fear itself, if you learn to process it, can lead you to the next higher level of inclusiveness, where whatever you fear, you realize that you can incorporate too. And so it is that we look at the conservative part of ourselves, the part that's been conditioned to Islam or Judaism or to Catholicism, and we take that part and we say, okay, what is it? What is it, honey?
Looking at the camera.
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I have a wife that's reminding me to look at the camera. Sometimes I forget.
That's okay.
Well, I got to say, you know, when I was a kid, I was an actor. My mother used to sit in the front row and mouth my words to me so that I was supposed to be saying. It used to distract me. And so even though my wife in the present, this is how things work, is giving me this wonderful help that I should look in this thing, I'm the childish part of me saying, don't tell me what to do, Mom. So this is an example of how you can transcend the different parts of you and reflect upon them instead of being forever alienated with it. So we can look at the core of what the control freaks that ran us, the people from Nibiru who settled here. They came 450,000 years ago from the planet Nibiru. That was a planet that had a long orbit and only came through the interplanetary system here every 3,600 years, and they were losing their atmosphere. They wanted to get gold from Earth for monoatomic. They wanted to get gold to process into a powdered gold, white powder of monoatomic gold, to make a shield of gold around their atmosphere, keep it in, and for other purposes. They also used it for longevity. They used in their medicines. And so they wound up sending an expedition here. They found gold. They first settled in the Persian Gulf area, and they traced where the gold was coming in the water, and they came down to South Africa, and they started this huge complex of mining, and they used they followed the earth ley lines, and they were able to bring the energy together in pyramids and broadcast it to monoliths that they set up. They had a whole big energy system, and they could move a lot. But the miners that they were bringing from the side of the planet, and the miners are just big Homo sapiens like us, except they were 8 to 12 feet high, okay? And and so they they mutinied. They just were sick of working miles under the ground, even with their machines. There were cave-ins. People were killed, and so they mutinied. And their chief scientist, a guy named Enki, said, "Hey, you know what? I'll make an adapted species out of our Homo sapien." And there's this local hominoid here. It was Homo erectus, the ancestor of Neanderthal and modern Bigfoot. But anyway, we'll take a little of his Erectus's genes, and they wound up taking also some copper and some clay, and they had a Nimma, their chief medical officer, actually carry the child, and then once they in her womb, so that we have this adapted worker, and they were really pretty as far as these astronauts and the 1,000 or so Nibiruans that were here. They were called the Anunnaki. So they started having babies with every generation, and so there was lots and lots of from their perspective, enhanced people in the worker race. And so it goes on like that. They're using these people, and there's this big rivalry among them. And they start using their slaves, that's us, the Earthlings, in wars against each other. And finally, their commander is just, he realizes that there's this great big flood coming as the Antarctic ice sheet is about to slide into the South Sea and cause a great deluge of 13,000 years ago. And he says, okay, look, we got to get off the planet and let those Earthlings, the slave race, drown. They're illegal. The Federation of Planets doesn't allow slave races. We did it anyway. There won't be a trace of them. None of them will survive. And I forbid anybody from this expedition to tell them, because they'll mob the spaceport and we won't be able to get off. And they're supposed to drown. And of course, Enki, who created them, just walked out. He wouldn't agree to anything like that. But he was afraid of the commander. And so, at this time, a representative of the higher power called Galzu came on the scene. He pretended he was a plenipotentiary representing King Anu of Nibiru, and he said, "Listen, you, the heads of this expedition, you shouldn't leave Earth because you'll die. You've been here too long. You've got to stay here forever now. Just orbit around the planet, then you can go back to the planet." And of course, this was a lie, but he said that to them, and then he managed to give Enki a computer program how to build a submersible. And Enki followed. He did not. Later said, I did not rat this out to any of the humans, but Enki's son, because he was with all the pretty girls too, was Noah. Ziusutra was his ancient name. And he went to Ziusutra's wall computer and slipped in the disk and said, and what it was directions of how to build a submersible. And he said, tell all your followers that you don't want to stay in Enlil's area anymore. Come down to Africa, where my place is, and you're building this big boat for that, and get everybody on the boat and come down. And if Enlil inquires what you're doing, just say that's what you're doing. And so Enlil says, oh, cool. Let them die. They're all going to die in the deluge anyway. Who cares where they go? They built this thing, and then Enki, the chief scientist, sent his son to guide it. And when the deluge came, first they buried all kinds of genetic starts in diorite tablets right there in Sumer, in modern Iraq. And Thoth, the geneticist that had worked with Enki, buried all kinds of wisdom too. And so they took off. The flood killed almost everybody. And in 120 days, they warned the hybrids, the astronauts who had taken human, Earthling, us brides, their families to get to the high ground. So after the flood, when the commander sees that Noah and his whole clan are cooking stuff and having a good time on the mountaintop, and that Enki's son is there with him, he goes to kill him. You disobeyed me. But the commander's sister and son come and restrain him and say, hey, look, Dad, we don't want to do work. Just let's let these humans breed, and we'll just work through them. These are the smartest ones anyway. We know they're the sons of Enki now. And so the sons of Noah were set up as the big rulers, and we're supposed to rule for the gods, and they set up. That's when suddenly, it's about 1,000 years of peace, very rare in human history. Everybody's building things, and they're making canals, and they're reclaiming Iraq and making it really nice like that. And then they start settling Egypt, and they separate the two clans. However, they these guys are obsessed from the time of they came on their planet with competition.
Sasha,
yeah.
Can we make a parenthesis here? I like to rewind a little bit because I found what you're sharing simply incredible, simply amazing. I like to, for the people that this is the first time that hear about the Anunnaki, hear about your work, can you start a little bit from the beginning to put them up to speed to what you are going, what you refer to, what is this Anunnaki thing, how this information came to you and to Zacharias. For the people that is hearing about this for the first time, what is this that I'm listening to?
Okay. So, I'm an anthropologist, and I study, I went to UCLA. I spent my whole life studying human history and contemporary human behavior. In anthropology, they had certain ideas that just didn't work, certain theories that didn't cover whatever people were actually finding in the earth and information that we were getting from written sources and everything. Whenever there was something, and the most baffling things of all were suddenly how this high civilization came about in 1,000 years after the Great Flood, with nothing to build up to it. Suddenly there's everything in a high civilization, metallurgy, everything. And so we got these records. They were written in clay, inscribed with a diorite roller, a little printing press. And there's thousands and thousands of these. And they say, here's what they say. And Zacharias Sitchin was one of the guys that translated this stuff and knows what they say.
When were they found, Sasha, and when and where?
Okay, so these were found mainly first in the area of Iraq, ancient Sumer. Okay. And at the time it was a place which they said was of 4 rivers. However, there's only 2 that we know of, the Tigris and the Euphrates. But the Sumerian text and the Sumerians, the scribes that wrote this stuff, said the gods dictated this to us. The gods were the Anunnaki. And who are these gods or Anunnaki? Oh, they're big 8 to 12 foot people that tell us what to do. That's who the gods are, and they say they came from this other planet. This planet is Nibiru. And so Sitchin is translating all this stuff. Well, anthropologists had said, well, that's just myth. People, primitive minds, they did things architecturally. They moved stones that we can't even move today. Are they making up these myths? No, they're just, this is what the gods told us to write. And they wrote stuff like, there's these planets out there past where we can see, Neptune and Uranus, and all kinds of stuff like that leads to very, very, and all this stuff gets unearthed starting about the 1920s and stuff. And so it seemed like people were making up stuff. And only when you start to get this idea of Sitchin, oh my gosh, these were just our ancestors describing things as best they could. A flying dragon is a jet plane, and so forth. A whale that eats Jonah is a submarine, otherwise it'd be digested. And then we start looking at what was really on the walls and what's in the back of the museums. And there's pictures of helicopters and rocket ships, and there's detailed descriptions of how do you get to Earth from Nibiru, and some of the things that they say in these things about how our solar system formed gives you specific kinds of predictions. And I'm reading all this stuff by Sitchin. Well, look, he says that Earth was made when this other planets bumped into Nibiru, is the name of the planet, bumped into Earth and knocked out the Pacific Basin. Earth used to be between Mars and Jupiter, and knocked a bunch of crumbs, those are the asteroid belt, out of it, and the rest of it knocked it between Mars and Venus, where we are now. And I said, well, if that's the case, that means the asteroids would be made of the same stuff as Earth. And it goes on and on, all these things. I mentioned the flood. One of these things that it talks about is this flood's coming, and they draw some pictures of what the Antarctic land continent looks like without the ice. And they drew it because they flew over it and they knew what it looked like. And now when we have sonar and we just now can look under the ice, we think, wow, they were right. So using a principle, which in science we call parsimony, or Occam's razor. Whatever explanation most simply accounts for most of the data and doesn't leave stuff out, that's the best one to use at present. And so, yeah, so that's some of the background. So there was this other planet. You want me to tell you about the other planet?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so this other planet, may have been revolving around a binary, another star that Earth was involved with, called Nemesis, or not. That's a big argument people are having. But in any case, it's coming by.
Yes, I heard that NASA has said recently that they suspect of a brown dwarf outside the Pluto orbit. Could that have something
Absolutely.
to do with
So that Andy Lloyd has identified this as a sub-brown dwarf. It's got enough heat that it's got its own internal heat, but it doesn't show up because it's not very bright, and it's the infrared that takes its picture. And one of the things that Andy Lloyd and a lot of astronomers are saying is that Nemesis, this other binary, is moving closer to Earth's orbit. All the planets of the inner planetary system are moving closer to the sun. They're all getting hot, and that global warming is only 15% caused by our pollution, and the other 85% of us just getting closer to the sun. That's one theory. Then there's another theory that what we're passing through now is what's called the Lagrange point, the 180-degree Lagrange point of Nibiru, and that Nibiru is now in Sagittarius, Delphinius specifically. And what we're passing through is some of the debris field that we pass through periodically. But in any case, the preponderance of what I've been seeing is that it's coming, or Neil Freer says, Nibiru is here, and you with a telescope or good binoculars might even be able to see it at sunrise from the southern hemisphere. And it's here, according to Freer.
Sasha, there's a lot of information about this on YouTube and everywhere else. Where do you think that Nibiru would be right now?
It's approaching us from the southern hemisphere. I think that on December 21st, 2012, as Kukulkan, that's Ningishita, one of these gods, told us, I shall return with 9 other gods, and by gods they mean simultaneously planets, and these Nibirans who are pledged to stamp out the evil, the disrespect for consciousness on this planet, and aid the forces of respect and planetary peace they're here. And so I think things have drastically changed since that day, and I think that if our listeners really tune in, they can notice that there is a change, that we are being helped, that we have an alternative universe, that we have another dimension that we can move to. We have a script that it's time for the Satya Yuga, for the 1,000 years of peace and love and ascendance.
Sasha, do you personally think that the approaching of this other system will bring any negative consequence to our own solar system and the planets and ultimately our planet?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think that this is not the time, given the angles, that the perigee, the closeness of Nibiru, is going to be critical or dangerous, as it has been in other times. Zechariah, in his later writings, say it's not going to happen until sometimes he says, many hundred years from now, sometimes 2050. It depends. They're saying that in one of the orbits of Nibiru, it came too close to Uranus, and it started going faster. And from that date on, it starts going in 3,450 years instead of 3,600 years around Earth. And so, since we don't know when it's coming, my advice is to have as much fun and be as nice to yourself and other people as you possibly can, because you don't know whether it's going to be all over any second or millions of years.
Yeah, right. Well, we get up out of bed every morning, and we don't know if we are going to go back to bed the next night. So there are no guarantees.
Yeah, and so in a way, this gives a vitality to our existence. If you're going to be yourself, absolutely, this is your chance to do it right now.
Yes, absolutely. Sasha, how Zacharias finding in your work can help us personally by acknowledging the possibility, at least, of a different origin than the one that we thought.
Okay, so these Nibirans, each group of them set up, worship me, and kill the guys that worship the other guy. Well, that's the same system that we have going. And then and these people, what they had on their home planet, what they brought to us, is violence, murder, hierarchy, putting women down, slavery, and gold lust. And that's what they modeled, that's who they were, and that's what a lot of them did, but there was a lot of different ones of them, and they had different characters just like us. We are them. But we've got this model, and it's like you've got to, once you see that religion is just a way of exploiting people, that debt, Nanar, one of these guys, invented this whole credit system. He's saying, we don't need armies. All we got to do is we can enslave people by debt. What a great idea. And so the descendants of these people, they're still around and they're still running the planet. Well, in anthropology, my discipline, we know that the basic human sanction, the things that you can do about an institution, is stop participating in them. It's called the sanction of nullity. The workers in America seized a decent living for a time by unions. We won't work unless you give us safe working conditions. And the Illuminati and their credit system can't really continue enslaving us. So these guys back on their planet had a military dictatorship. And they bombed each other with atomic bombs. They also got us to bomb ourselves. They bombed Sinai and Sodom and Gomorrah in this, and they have introduced all the horrors that we live by. And they are not gods. They're big people with super technology and a lot of psychic powers. But what we found time and again, for example, Homer relates how Diomedes actually wounded, he cut Inanna on the arm with his sword, and everybody said, wow, we thought they were gods. We can kill them. And of course the other gods made a circle around her and got her out of there. But we don't have to be slaves. And one of the ways we free ourselves from being slaves is we stop these stupid religions and supporting priesthoods that do terrible things to people in their basements.
Sasha, I grew up and was raised Catholic, going to a Catholic-based school for the elementary school. There was something that made me never buy their story. I didn't know in those days why. I just ended up pulling myself apart, forgetting about religion altogether, until later on in my life I began to realize why I was feeling that way. And the story that you are telling us, it tends to feel some of those missing pieces, blank pieces in the middle. Why, Sasha, we haven't heard this from our mainstream historians?
It gets suppressed by the powers that be, who want the religions to keep people in place and pit them against each other. But with the Knights Templar, who dug under the temple at Jerusalem, found a lot of the records that these Sumerians left, and they blackmailed the Catholic Church for a long time with this. We know that we came from extraterrestrials, and there was more than one of them. In the Bible, you say, Yahweh when God's doing something terrible, but you say Adonai when he does something really neat. And why do you say the first commandment, know no other gods before me? Are there other gods to know before me? It goes on and on and on.
That's very interesting, that point.
So this developed the Knights Templar, who at one time were even more powerful than the Catholic hierarchy. And Jesus' wife, Mary Magdalene, after he was spirited away from the place of his supposed killing, went to Marseille. It was Marcella, and married into this same line of Merovingian kings, which later is now again part of the Illuminati. But it was this whole idea that there was people that knew the truth, and there's a lot of stories in the works that we've been following that Jesus realized the truth too, and basically wherever he went, he was the spokesperson for the common person and respecting of the consciousness of everybody. And he got in trouble continuously because he broke free from these Anunnaki gods and realized there was a way higher space. And that's what everybody in them, it's sort of a model for what we all can do.
Sasha, there's so much we could continue talking about this. Tell the people where they can go to find more information about this.
Oh, the best place, or a really good place, is called EnkiSpeaks.com. www.EnkiSpeaks, EnkiSpeaks.com. And or buy our book, Anunnaki, Gods No More. And it's really important to just at least say, look at this way of explaining things. Does this explain things, more things, simpler than the other ways? It's all you need to do. And your intellect is so powerful that once it understands something, it'll make everything else fall in line.
I see. Okay, Sasha, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sharing, for giving a very, very brief introduction to the story of the Anunnaki and our origins. I know that there's much more to know about this. And your book, can you repeat the name of your book? And they can find it, I'm sure.
Yeah,
it's in Amazon, right?
It's at Amazon.com. Okay, it's called Anunnaki. That's A-N-U, Anunnaki, N-N-A-K-I, Anunnaki, Gods No More. And it's at Amazon. Amazon.
Okay, Sasha, we have the costume of sharing a free gift with the people that is watching this. Can you tell them what it's going to be about?
Oh, yeah, I'm really happy to share a preview of the next book that we're writing. It'll be out shortly, called Legacy of the Gods. And in this preview, you really get some of the really important things that we are showing about how the idea of evolution is nonsense. We were created, and that's one really big important thing that you'll find out about. And you'll see the preponderance of evidence leading to the conclusions of the world is not the way you thought it was. Everything you've been taught is a lie, but that the truth is becoming ever more available.
And like they say, the truth will set you free.
Absolutely. But, you know, the corollary is the truth will set you free, but it might make you very angry.
Yeah. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you again very, very much for being here and for sharing all this with all of us.
Aloha.
Aloha. Bye.